This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the My Campaign Coach podcast. Today we're talking with Ryan Mauldin about campaign management, visual branding, and your online presence. Ryan is the president and founder of Vici Media, where he and his team have done award and campaign-winning work for campaigns of every level. Prior to launching Vici, Ryan gained considerable experience as a campaign manager and a serial entrepreneur. It was during our time at Hillsdale College that Ryan and I first crossed paths, and we quickly developed a bond over our mutual conservatism, as well as our status as Texas expats. Ryan's consistent drive for excellence makes him someone that I always love doing work with, and the breadth of his experience gives him real insight into the way candidates need to approach their digital strategy. I'm glad he could come on and share some of that knowledge with us today. With that, Ryan, welcome.
Hey, Roz, good to be with you.
Well, thank you for taking some time out of your day. I know you're staying busy on the road this week up there in D.C. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got involved in politics and your political involvement in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. So I first got pulled in, well, actually, I was about to say the professional side, but I was actually a volunteer on campaigns in high school, the state legislative level. Those were not successful ultimately, the one in particular, the bigger one that I was part of, but did have the opportunity later to manage a successful race against the same candidate that I'd volunteered against previously. So got to start a little bit unexpectedly. I was starting a company and had a lot of flexible time as a result of that in between companies. And my high school soccer coach was asked by a local Tea-Party to run for office. He asked me to help. By the end of the campaign, I was managing it. We ended up
That's how it
winning.
works.
Yeah, exactly. You get sucked in, and then all of a sudden, hey, you're willing to work? Great, you're in charge of something. So both of us were relative novices, although David had been elected before to a smaller office. But for something of that level, with around 150, 160,000 constituents, running against a decade-plus incumbent chairman with multiple times the amount of money that we had, as well as the time and name ID, et cetera. Definitely felt unprepared going into it, but we learned quickly and put our nose to the grindstone. And in the space of just a few short months, with somewhere around a third the amount of money, we're able to unseat the incumbent in that area. So it was an interesting and, again, unexpected entree into the professional political space.
Okay. Well, that was the 2010 race between David Simpson and Tommy Merritt, right?
Tommy Merritt, correct.
Yeah. So this was not, to give you guys that are listening a perspective, this was I don't know how much money David raised, but he didn't raise much. And this was an inexperienced team with little money going up against one of the best funded, most entrenched incumbents that cycle in the state house. And so Ryan and David, it's a true David versus Goliath story, because they worked hard. They used the kind of Tea-Party wave that came through, and the fact that they were underestimated from the beginning, and they came up and they beat somebody that should have been the hardest person to beat that cycle.
Yeah, and you hit on a point there, which was definitely very, very helpful. We were underestimated. That allowed us to sneak up on the incumbent. And he didn't really realize the extent of the groundwork we'd laid until just a few weeks out from the election. At that point, the momentum was set. So it was definitely a surprise. We were thankfully able to. It wasn't just a surprise, because we were able to beat him by over 20 points in a re-election the following cycle. So that we were able to build a brand that stuck as well and stuck around. But it was certainly a lot of learning by doing, and building a grassroots network and going straight to individual voters, taking a message out, because we didn't have the money to drop in large television buys, radio buys, things like that. We may have had a small amount of radio, but it was almost so little that I don't even recall with specificity what we would have placed. It was mostly some mail little bit of digital, and a lot of groundwork and door-to-door politics.
Well, and that was especially difficult for your race because David's district, that was a very rural area. You had a couple different areas like Longview and some of Tyler that were in there, but you didn't have a whole lot of urban centers that you were knocking in. These were small towns that maybe some place you can barely call a city out in East Texas that you had to knock doors, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. So Longview is the seat of it. That District 7 at the time was all of Gregg County in the north of Smith County, which is so Longview is the largest element, but it's probably about half of the district, and then the other half was largely rural and small to mid-size. Gilmer and Hallsville and a number of other cities in that area. So White Oak, but it was really great though to be able to celebrate the locale of each individual spot, and people appreciated that. When you were willing to go the lengths to go out and walk door to door in the neighborhoods that weren't right next door to each other, which obviously you can't do in every race, but in this particular one, it made a difference. People noticed it. They appreciated the fact that we were willing to go talk to them, and there were, I can't tell you how many dozens of people told David that he was the first politician that had ever knocked on their door.
Yeah, that's a rare thing. We talked with Matt Krause last week, and he was talking to us about how many thousands of doors he knocked. And I know that you and David wore out quite a bit of shoe leather that cycle, getting out there and talking to voters, and it just plain works. That's one of the best ways, especially for a low-funded campaign, to be able to go and outmatch a well-funded, well-entrenched opponent.
No, absolutely is. There is absolutely nothing that beats direct contact with a candidate, as long as you have the right candidate.
That helps.
That's a big caveat. But assuming you have somebody who people like when they meet, which I hope you do, then
I have had candidates that I've been around who I've been around who I was like, let's not put them out there. They're really smart, but let's just not put them out there talking to voters.
We've had one or two of those as well. They're great. Let's put them on a camera with staging and such, but they're not great on their feet. Very good people, but yeah, if you have somebody who's personable, that is your single biggest asset.
Well, David and Matt both fit that in spades. Now, talk to me a little bit about your evolution since then, because you guys won that race with David against Tommy, and then you moved forward from there into the 2012 election cycle.
Yeah, so I actually did a little bit of work again in the 2010 with the generals, so runoffs and generals. I managed some runoffs, local races close by, and then a general election against a Democrat in a few districts up in North Texas. Again, very similar in the fact that he was a decade-plus incumbent chairman. At that point, we actually did have a slight money advantage, so it was a different race. It was with a professional experience team. It was with Kevin Brannon leading the race on the consulting side. So I had the opportunity then to really study under somebody who knew what they were doing, had been around the block for quite some time, and had a wealth of experience to bring to the table, and was highly disciplined as well in his messaging, in his campaign tactics, use of time, things like that. So two very different races in the same cycle with otherwise similar influences in terms of the political climate. So it was a great learning ground for really developing a sense of political tactics, how to win a campaign successfully, given very, very different sets of assets. One time we were underfunded, the other we had a money advantage. One time we had primarily volunteers, the next we had a full team, and so there were some great opportunities to compare and contrast those two experiences. After that, did run David's reelection, which I mentioned, against Tommy. Representative Merritt, and at the same time was beginning to found Vici Media Group at that time. So I was doing both at the same time, and that was it was definitely a stretching experience. But from there, we launched Vici a little over 5 years ago. 5 years ago in the summer. And have since grown to take on literally dozens of campaigns all over the country, and from the smallest to the largest. So we've run the gamut from local all the way to the top ticket, and it's been quite a ride. And you have to change and adapt based on the circumstances of an election cycle, based on the size of the race, the assets available to you. Everyone's a little different. The strategy, the mindset behind it is similar, but how you apply it and taking the right lessons from history to apply to the current situation always changes every time. So it's great. It's like a battlefield in that way, where you could study history all you want. You still have to know how to apply it and be your own strategist.
Well, that's one of the things I really appreciate about you guys, and why I've enjoyed working so closely with you on a number of projects, is because from yourself to Jordan and Patrick and the rest of the folks on your team, whether I'm putting together a mailer or looking at a palm card or coming up with a social media strategy, you guys from the beginning to the end are both just fantastic to work with, as well as the fact you know your stuff. In some cases, I've come together with a very clear idea of what I wanted. In other cases, I feel like I've probably made Jordan pull some hair out, just coming in and saying, hey, Jordan, I kind of want to do this. What do you think? And what they put together just surpasses my expectations every time. So kudos to the team you put together there, because it really is a pleasure to work with you guys on a regular basis.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's certainly the people you have around you are the most important part of any organization. So we're definitely very blessed to have some great people.
No doubt about it. Now, what does your relationship look like with a lot of those clients? Is this something where you do a lot of regular in-person calls? Do folks primarily work with an account rep? What does your working relationship look like with a lot of these folks?
Yeah, it does vary a little bit client by client. For the most part, we don't meet our clients unless they're elected, and we eventually meet them in Austin. Although certainly there are clients in Iowa and Ohio and Virginia and other places that we've never actually met in person. The advantage of digital in some ways is that a lot of your work can be done remotely. So we're able to jump on to places all over the country. Most of the time, we will have a relationship with a consultant or the campaign manager, and they will indicate the overall objectives of the campaign. We'll help them turn that into a digital outline. For others that are digitally savvy, particularly, or have taken the time to think through it themselves, will give us a set of deliverables like, hey, we need a website with this, that, and the other features on it. We need these ads. Here's our budget. Run with us. So sometimes we have some people that we work with that are very specific and have a fair amount of digital knowledge themselves, and we implement. And then there are others that basically come to us and say, we have a campaign. What do we need on digital? And we'll help them turn that into an outline of priorities, of objectives, and budgets that allow them to fit their needs and the particularities of their campaign. But typically that is working with, to answer one of your specific questions, an account rep. So Jordan is our account lead for a lot of the day-to-day stuff. I work on strategy. Patrick is our creative director. We've got a team outside of that. It is coding, additional graphic design, ad placement, things like that.
And I know that you don't work with just anybody. You have to be selective about who you work with, both as far as within the party and without. What are some of the guiding principles, if you will, that you use when you're deciding, who you want to work with and who you're just kind of let that opportunity pass?
That's something that's changed a little bit with experience. In general, I try to follow Buckley's rule of the most conservative candidate who can win. So we've worked with a number of candidates across a bit of an ideological spectrum that we felt like were the best, most conservative, winnable candidate. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes you take a race because it's a better candidate, period. And even if they don't, they have a harder chance of winning. So we really do take it on a case-by-case basis. There are a few litmus tests, like we don't work with overtly pro-choice candidates. It's just a line that I won't cross. There are a few others, but in general, we take that on a case-by-case basis and analyze the race, look at their principles, look at who their team is. Do we trust the the consultants and the other team that the rest of the team that they work with. And we think that they have a reasonable chance of actually engaging and of the type of campaign that we can actually provide value to. There have been some campaigns we've turned down in the past because it's simply not a good fit. Either they don't believe in digital, which is obviously our focus, or we just don't think that the amount of the outlay of time and effort is going to produce a useful end through the campaign.
I definitely respect that. It's difficult for the listener just to know that it's difficult when you're in a consulting role to try to figure out what that line is. And I respect that you have those firm principles that you use to set up those boundaries. I have similar ones, and I think it's important that as folks are looking for consultants, they need to know that the people they work with do have lines they won't cross. Because there are some people that don't have those lines, and they're not people you want to be around or work with. Whatever your lines may be, find somebody that you agree with on those fundamentals and work closely with them. So looking towards what you guys do and your specific focus on digital, what are some of the top attributes you look for when analyzing a campaign's digital presence? Sort of indicators as far as whether they're healthy or need a lot of help.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a lot of caveats that go into that about the size of the race, et cetera. So let's maybe limit the conversation to state legislative to statewide, because you get on either side of that and a lot of the considerations change. So if we're looking at a state level campaign, then we're going to start with the overall branding as the first thing, assuming we have time, assuming we have some amount of budget, et cetera. So I'm giving a few caveats there, but assuming we're being brought in for a full digital program within that, we'll start with branding. We'll look at, is the branding both presenting the campaign in a positive light? If they have something in existence, is it something that we can adapt for use in multiple platforms? If not, then we'll revisit that, or if they don't have any branding, then develop it. From there, we'll flesh that out into the other branding elements, such as the website, push cards, some of the other basics, business cards, stuff like that, to make sure that all the nuts and bolts are in place. Given the scale, the size of the campaign, we'll invest more time in list building and things like that, or list building tools, for instance, on the website. The features will adjust accordingly. But we want to make sure that at least the basics are covered first. So do you have all your major information on the site? If somebody arrives at your site, are they going to know anything about you, or at least, or certainly know at least the most important things about you? That you're running, what office you're running for, what do you stand for? Even putting a few basic lines or a slogan in a prominent place can at least set the impression quickly for who you are. And that's all the basics of branding, period, just applied to politics, but that doesn't really change based on any kind of organization you go through. After that, we'll look at list health. So do the lists exist? If so, what's the state of them on Facebook, on Twitter, on email as the primary three? Outside of that, we'll look to cross-apply matching your mailing list to email, setting up retargeting pixels. So some of the baseline elements, and then you get into, of course, some of the more specifics. Like, do you have a list that's highly targeted in your district? Or does your list reflect your target demographics? So that's where we talk to the consultant and or the pollster to make sure that the list that exists, if it does, is highly aligned to our target demographic. And if it doesn't, then what do we need to do to change that, to build up the list, to reinvest in email, in your social presence, to make sure that we're able to actually talk to the right people. As we'll have people come to us sometimes and say, oh, look, I've got a Facebook presence, I've got 5,000 likes, I've got 10,000 likes, I've got whatever it is, depending on the size of the race. And that's fantastic, but it's really a vanity metric. If the real important thing is how closely does that overlap with the actual voters, likely voters in your district. So we start drilling down into the health of targeting, the health of your assets and lists, or building them. And from that point, of course, go into the actual implementation and messaging phase. So what is your message? Once we have that, let's turn that into social graphics, into an email program, into an advertising program, to start building your name ID, or reinforcing it depending on your situation, and really trying to drill in on the messages that are most important for converting available voters.
That's really cool. I appreciate you giving that kind of detail. And guys, this is also part of why I like to hire Ryan to do these things, because there's several of those things like setting the pixels and those kind of things that I have no idea what that means. So that's why I call Ryan. Now, looking at some of the pitfalls that campaigns oftentimes fall into, especially the ones that try to do too much on their own. They try to learn too much on the job and potentially try to outsource stuff to their brother-in-law. What are some of the pitfalls that they fall into in those types of campaigns?
It's definitely a classic pitfall. It's a decision that we run up against every single cycle. Somebody's got a friend they want to use. The reality is that experience matters. And the experience of having run dozens of campaigns, digital operations, allows us the advantages of knowing some of the best list vendors, the best ways of targeting. We'll have people who will go in and just target everything in every zip code in the district, which is fantastic if you want to target with the same level of accuracy that you get on broadcast television. But you're going to end up wasting about 70% of that money. Because only a certain number, especially if you're a primary candidate, only a fraction of the population votes. So you can look at one of the biggest pitfalls within that, to be more specific, is you can look at the wrong metrics. You can look at metrics that sound fantastic but don't actually matter. So you could be building the wrong kinds of lists.
What are some of those metrics that folks should stay away from?
So total list size, for instance, one that we referenced earlier, total list size is absolutely irrelevant. Total list size in your target demographic is what actually matters. So making sure that is as highly targeted as possible, so you're not wasting dollars both building the list as well as advertising to the list. So we'll use tools like some of the cookie matches, IP matches, which are available based on third-party data sets. From nationally maintained voter lists. We'll take your own lists and run them against a match in various platforms to find what's targetable easily within that. Recently, Facebook, for instance, rolled out an element within that allows us to target much more closely and at less expense, frankly, too, than it used to be. That it used to cost. Another one can be looking at the number of posts we're putting up. That's one of the other things. Well, people say, look, I'm posting once a week. Isn't that fantastic? Well, not really. We've had that happen multiple times. Can't tell you how many times people come up and say, I don't want to wear out my list. I post once a week. I'm like, well, some of our properties post once an hour, and we still haven't worn out those lists. So there are certain elements like that, just knowing what other people are doing, knowing what's working. We're watching admins on dozens of Facebook pages, and so we can draw tactics from one that we find to work into some of the other projects we work on. So there's some advantages like that, just having a broad perspective on the industry and seeing what's working and what's not.
That's pretty cool, and definitely very valuable insight to be able to have that much perspective from your clients to be able to aggregate that together. So talk me through some first steps. So if I'm a low budget campaign, I'm a state rep size or lower, down to city council, and I've got a limited budget. I'm a first time challenger. What are some of the first steps that I need to take as a candidate when I work through setting up my digital campaign from my side? It's before I've got enough money on hand to go and hire Vici. What should I do in that interim?
The first thing is to make sure you have your basic presences up in a way that people can find them. So set up get the simplest possible URL for your website address. So obviously first name, last name .com is your highest value URL. If you can't get that, then you go on the nearest option outside of it. And make sure you have at least the basic information in an easily findable format. So have your contact information on the website and on Facebook. Make sure you have your Facebook page set up, not your personal profile, but get a public page that you start posting from, and have the basics of your picture, your contact information, the URL. Set the URL for Facebook as well, so it matches or is similar to your website. Make sure your basic presences are set up with your contact information, policy positions, and what people can do. So you donate today, get involved, call this number. From there, start engaging with people. So ask your friends to like your page, ask your friends to share your page, and ask their friends to like it. The power of network advocacy is really huge, especially when you're starting out like that. And then engage with people on there. Post relevant content and answer questions. Go through every night and spend 5 or 10 minutes answering questions that come up. And when you're at that level, you should be able to answer everything that people post on there. That's very, very powerful. It's like going and getting a knock on your door. Not quite as big as that, but it's still a direct contact with a candidate. So it's very valuable voter contact. And then be sure to build your list. We already talked about asking friends to ask their friends to like your page. Take your email sign-up form everywhere you go. Take it with you door to door. Take it with you to community events. Tape a sign-up sheet at the door for anywhere you are, and keep a pin there with it. And just make sure you are constantly building your list from day one. Every chance you get, take business cards and plug those in. Make sure you get let people know that they'll start getting your updates, and then start a regular content program. So that doesn't have to be every day, doesn't have to be every hour. At least once a week, send an email. At least every other day, post on Facebook. But take a snapshot of where you are, and say, hey, I'm happy to be outdoor walking at in this neighborhood. Look for me to knock on your door soon. Stuff like that is really great branding, and lets people know that you're active and you're actually doing things. Because even at a small state rep level, the majority of voters will not meet you in most cases. And so use whatever tools you can to make sure that they know that you're actually out and working and fighting for that race. One of the things that's changing that I definitely do want to emphasize about the new environment around digital and social is the emphasis on direct access to the candidate. Jason Isaac did this a couple of years ago, actually, in a great way. It's sort of a precursor to what we're seeing in a much fuller form now. Instead of block walking, he called it block jogging. And he would take a selfie video of himself and usually his wife or his kids out going door to door in jogging clothes. And he said, I want to, so if I recall correctly, something along the lines of, I want you to know I'm working hard for you to earn your vote. And because block walking isn't enough, I'm block jogging. And that's how I'm going to run. That's how I'm going to run my office. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to settle for walking. I'm going to run all the way for you. Something along those lines. And it was just really fantastic. It made the news all over the place. Those sorts of authentic moments with a candidate where you get direct access to see who they are, their personality, their family, the context, because people want to trust the person. And frankly, we saw that in a huge way this cycle. Benny Johnson at IJ Review, as an acquaintance of some years, I really want to throw a compliment his way, because he's done some fantastic work making candidates seem human, and office holders seem human. And he's done this great series with everybody from Senator Lindsey Graham to Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina. I think he did a piece with Rick Perry, definitely did with a good number of other candidates, where they're just authentic kind of human experiences. And he'll bring them into the IJ Review studios and do some fun stuff, whether it's taking a blend tag blender to see will it blend for Senator Lindsey Graham's cell phone one time, to having Ben Carson and Carly Fiorina mock pardon a turkey last Thanksgiving. Just fun stuff like that that shows a more human element to the candidate as opposed to the perfectly polished image of, say, a Mitt Romney, where they literally had consultants from an article I read, they had consultants to tell him how many scuffs to put on his shoes so he would appeal to the average voter as well as the well-to-do.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
I suppose, according to this reporter, that was actually a thing that they did.
Wouldn't surprise
Which
me.
again, we laugh, but they did this. This is the political class sometimes gets their head up their ass,
Yeah.
thinking that we've got to have everything perfect, and in the end, what people ultimately want in most cases is authenticity. No, they want an authentically good person, but they still want to feel like they know who the person is that they're electing to office, and for all of his controversy. Donald Trump did this in a masterful way. Hillary Clinton was the single most guarded candidate. I was about to say in recent history. Mitt Romney was also quite guarded, but Hillary was guarded like a hawk, and everything was scripted for her. And Trump, which got him in trouble sometimes, but Trump was very much in charge of his own conversation, and he let voters see who he was, and
And his Twitter feed.
his Twitter feed, exactly, and on stage and all too. But certainly Twitter was the king of that for him. And again, it was certainly not uncontroversial, but you very much saw who he was. And you got kind of a direct window into Donald Trump's mind in some ways. And a lot of, obviously the majority of voters appreciated that. I definitely think that is the direction that we're going. It won't go back. Yeah, it will go forward in that direction to one extent or another.
Well, and I was talking with one of our mutual friends and a former trainee of mine, Senator Hall, a couple weeks ago. And as we were talking about it, I was asking for some tips that I could share. And one of the things he said is, Raz, when I started this, I thought it was a lot more important that people agree with me than like me. And I quickly found out that voters don't really care as much about what you believe on an issue as whether they think you're a good person, whether they like you personally. And as sad as that may be at some points, it's important for us to remember that just because you agree with somebody doesn't mean that you're going to get their vote. If they think you're a jerk, they're probably not going to vote for you. You need to build that relationship through these personal means of whether it's Facebook messaging with them or knocking on their door, finding personal ways to show your humanity. That's going to go so far in making it possible for you to get their vote.
No, absolutely. And that played out, frankly, in David's race as well, David Simpson's race, where certainly for re-election, I think we got that comment more than the initial. Hey, you're too nice to be a politician. I don't believe you. You're not really elected. We got stuff like that. We got. I've seen some of the stuff you've done. I don't always agree with you, but I know I can trust you. To be honest with
Right.
me. That kind of thing played out, and the result was we turned a couple point victory into the re-election rematch was it was a 20, if I recall correctly, about a 23.5 point victory.
Well, you guys are definitely beneficiaries of the fact that it was a whole lot easier to like David than to like Tommy. So when it's likability terms, you guys are going to win that from day one once they got to know David.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard to not like David once you've met him.
It really is. He's just a great guy. Now, as we're kind of wrapping up, walk me through what has you most excited about your work, because this is not a regularly thanked business. This is pretty thankless business when you get out to it. And you guys are working hard. You're doing great work. But what keeps you excited about it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So I think the part that has probably our entire team most excited about the work that we do is the window into history, if you will, the ability to watch a lot of things play out that some people see on most people see on television or read about in the newspaper. Getting a little bit of a window into what's actually happening and knowing some of the people making policy decisions and seeing who they are really. That's definitely been an exciting part. sometimes a disappointing part, to be honest.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah, it can be very much both. Because people aren't always what they seem. Sometimes they're better people. Sometimes they're not as good. And that vantage point has been just a real adventure to be able to participate in some of the things that eventually people write history about. We had I've had articles about our candidates in pretty much every major paper in the country. So that kind of stuff is it's just exciting. There are perks to every job. That's one of the perks of this one, is getting to help shape the policy and direction of the country.
Well, you guys have definitely had a great part in electing some people that have definitely shaped that policy, and I definitely appreciate the role that you've played there. Tell us a little bit more about where they can find you online and how folks can reach out to you guys if they don't get you and Patrick and Jordan and your team at Vici helping them out.
Absolutely. We're at ViciMediaGroup.com. V as in Victor, I, C as in cat, I, mediagroup.com. Our phone number is 512-222-VICI, V-I-C-I. You can also find us on social. Those are the best places to start, and we're always available.
And what's your Twitter handle?
Also Vici Media Group.
Perfect. Well, guys, I will have all that information in the show notes, and to make it easier for you guys to reach out to Ryan and his team. They're awesome. I love working with them, and I know you will too. Ryan, thank you so much for taking time out of a busy day with meetings up there in D.C. to come and talk to us today. And I look forward to getting lots of questions back from folks and seeing them interacting with you on social media. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Appreciate it, man. Great to talk as always.
All right, guys, we'll talk to you all again next week. In the meantime, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on all the different social channels. Make sure to leave a review if you can. It really helps us out a lot and helps get the word out to other people about what we're trying to do here at My Campaign Coach.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.